Hello, everyone. Yeah. Hello, everyone. And we'll just wait for another minute so that we have others join as well. So we'll start the session sharp at 12:01 p.m. AEDT. Yeah, so let's get started. Once again, hello everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the Australia Chapter's Global Game Week. I am Anshumala Sharma, and I'll be your host for today's session. Supporting me behind the scenes are Tracy, Dan, and Amit, who will keep us on track and ensure that everything flows smoothly. So today we are diving into one of the most intriguing aspects of knowledge management, tacit knowledge. As a fellow knowledge professional, I know how challenging it can be to capture this kind of knowledge effectively. I mean, I struggle it every day, and I'm sure many of you can relate to it as well. I'm eager to explore the right techniques for capturing tacit knowledge with our esteemed speakers and hear about your experiences and insights as knowledge professionals too. Let's try to make this an interactive session, and we would hugely appreciate if your support and participation. Now, before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping items. Please keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking, and we'd love to see your faces. So if you are able to, please turn on your camera. And finally, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat anytime. As I said, we want this to be an interactive session. So if you have any comments, if you want to share your experiences, also feel free to unmute yourself and share your thoughts with us. Now, I will start with an acknowledgement of country. And for those who have not heard about this before, we do this in Australia to show our respect for the Indigenous peoples of Australia. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the different lands on which we are joining from today. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present. Thank you so much for joining me in this acknowledgement. Enough of my monologue. Now let's move on to the speakers. I am thrilled to introduce our fantastic lineup of speakers who will share their wealth of experience on the topic of tacit knowledge. Let's start with Lloyd Lawrence. Lloyd is an experienced knowledge management leader with a proven track record of enhancing organization success through strategic KM initiatives. With expertise in tools like KCS 6.0 and a background in developing comprehensive KM frameworks, he has a unique ability to unlock hidden potential within knowledge assets, reduce cost, and streamline processes. His experience also includes serving as a project knowledge manager at Airbus Australia Pacific, where he wrote a knowledge framework for the ISO 9001 quality manual and managing a knowledge base that consists of 7,000 articles for a workforce of 85,000 users across the state of Queensland with Department of Education. With a strong background in knowledge management and collaboration across global teams, Lloyd brings valuable expertise in identifying tacit knowledge and optimizing knowledge assets for organizational success. With that, let me hand it over to Lloyd.
Thanks, Angshu. Okay, so today I'm here to talk about speed dating, but for knowledge. Okay, Tracy. Okay, so I've developed a methodology which basically formalizes those water cooler conversations. So everyone's would have experienced in their time in the workplace, hovering around the kitchen at lunchtime or at break time, and just getting those informal conversations happening with people. What did you get up to over the weekend? What have you been working on? Are you doing anything exciting? Yada, yada. And as you'd know from your own experience, there's times where you connect with someone and they can actually tell you something that they can help you with that you didn't really know about. So you get those aha moments, those real surprise moments, or perhaps maybe they know somebody that can help you with something or can share some knowledge with you, whether it's work related or even personal related. Okay, Tracy. Okay, so what I did, I experienced a situation in the office which led me to come up with this facilitated workshop. So basically what this does, this formalizes the water cooler conversations, and it brings people together to connect and do a rapid in-person or virtual event to draw out that information quite quickly. So what we do is we'll get everybody together, as I say, either in person or it can be conducted over a virtual event. We pair them up and we do 2 rapid rounds. And what we do is we get people together, say, introduce themselves, assuming they don't already know each other. And then, hi, I'm so-and-so. This is what I'm working on. This is what I'm stuck on. So they have a couple minutes to convey that. And then they swap over to the other person in the pair. Hi, I'm so-and-so. This is what I'm working on. This is what I'm stuck on. Okay, and then at the end, we'll capture all that information on sticky notes, once again, whether it's physical or virtual. The idea being that we can come back to that at a later time and we can pair up those needs with the knowers, if you like, or the learners with the knowers. And we can also identify gaps and put people together and make those connections and make that information flow happen. Okay, so my inspiration, as I say, I did come across the situation in the workplace, which led me to come up with this workshop. So basically, I was talking with a project team member, and they were tasked with writing a manual on a topic that they really didn't know much about. So they spent months emailing people, phoning people, trying to locate experts that had the knowledge. And I learnt about this one day because I'm walking past his desk and I see this whopping big manual that he's written. I'm like, what's this all about? So he's conveyed to me this story, this experience. And then he said to me, you know what? I've finished this, I've thrown it down on my desk, and a person from 4 desks away has walked past and gone, oh, I know all about this. So we have this sort of situation where, you know, you come into the workplace and you see people, you recognize them by face, and you may or may not know them by name, but that's really a lot of the times that's as far as it gets, right? So what this does, this workshop actually gets beyond that. It gets people to connect. You're surrounded by people and you don't really know what, you know, the heart of what they know, their experiences, and how they may be relevant to you, or vice versa, how your experiences may be relevant to them. So that's what this is all about, discovering knowledge. Okay, so what are the benefits of doing a speed learning activity? Okay, so first and foremost, and going by that, that inspiration, unblocking projects and tasks. You know, in that sort of circumstance, you can see where there's the potential where that could cause a massive run-on of time or even budget blowouts to a project, because we have that situation where we don't know what we know because people aren't organically making those connections otherwise. As I said before, it gets people beyond that, you know, just knowing people by the face, just giving them the nod on the wave when you walk past, or that hi, you know. We really need to develop those connections. And beyond that, it obviously then therefore fosters working relationships. Discovering knowledge for immediate or future needs. There is those situations where, you know, we draw out this knowledge. It may not be relevant right now to somebody or to you, but because we know it's there, we know we can tap into it in the future. Obviously, as I say, identifying knowledge gaps, we could find that there could be 4 or 5 people saying that they need help with such and such a topic, but there's nobody there that has stuck their hand up to say that they know it. So then we need to find a way to fill that gap. The great thing is we know that gap's there and we know that it needs to be filled, so then we can take action. Obviously, identifying experts, and as I said, At the heart of all of this is connecting the learners with the knowers. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. I guess to convey another example where this had pretty big impact was where I ran this in Department of Education in Queensland. We did a number of pairings, and basically I had a complete random pairing between an IT service desk agent and a school teacher. And the IT service desk agent ran a drone photography business outside of the work environment, but he needed help with Unity graphics. The teacher needed help with running a drone process, but he was an expert in Unity graphics. So these two people connecting together, it was just amazing. Everybody was quite shocked actually, and it was quite beneficial for both. They got immediate benefit out of that sort of connection. So these are the sorts of things that can happen completely unknowingly. And that's it for me. So for further information, feel free to email or have a look at that my personal website. There is a podcast recording on there regarding this.
Angshu, should I jump in with questions from the audience?
Yes.
Yep.
Please.
I have one from Stuart. Stuart, did you want to ask a question, or you're?
Yeah, Lloyd, I've found that not everyone's the same, level of comfort in social interactions. Do you sort of cover on, what do you do in your job? What's something that you would be surprised to know about me? What are my hobbies? Do you give a sort of a list or something just to help people?
Yeah, that's a really good point and very valid. It's the sort of thing where it would be quite beneficial to do that, to lead into that sort of thing in the introducing of the workshop. And in fact, what I found too is that I'm a little bit flexible when I run these workshops. I say people, there's no real rule or no real specific topic. And in fact, I'll even extend that to say, look, it doesn't even have to be work related. Because let's face it, any sort of connection with people at work will bolster that working relationship. And also to extend on your point about the social, not everybody being socially comfortable, the great thing about capturing these things, if we capture them on one of those big posty sheets and it's physical post-it notes, you have all your needs, bang, 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 and all the knowledge points, bang, 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 and they're left in a physical place where people walk past a high traffic area, then people can actually just quietly in their own time just come along and browse those after the fact, and then just make their own connections by themselves in isolation to that sort of intensive social situation.
And Lloyd, one question that I have is, so how do you practice, or how do you capture the lessons learned, so to say, or if I have to think about a deliverable out of these sessions, so what would it look like?
Yeah, so my experience with lessons learned, I tend to go towards a register. I'll have some sort of register set up. And even this workshop can capture those sorts of things. So I would transpose any information I capture into some sort of lessons learned register that says basically this was the issue, this was who recorded it, and when, this is what led to that lesson. Perhaps we might already have something that indicates how we might prevent that lesson again. But to me, it's critical that there's some sort of central repository. Quite often with lessons learned, I'll see there's a lessons learned for this project and one for that project and one for that project and one for that project, but they're never connected together. So you still run that risk of relearning the same lessons over and over again because they're not all consolidated for people to draw from across the board.
Yeah. Dan, do we have more questions? Right.
No, that's
Sorry, Dan, I actually have a question. I think someone else just put their hand up as well. Lloyd, I'm thinking of this maybe less about the capturing of the tacit knowledge, but even as a connecting tool, right? And I was just wondering if you had done this as or incorporated it into kind of like a workplace social event.
Yeah, well, interestingly, when I proposed this to the manager at Airbus to run this, what we did was we decided to. Well, he sponsored the event, if you like, as a morning tea. So we know everybody loves food. People connect quite well with food, and everybody will come together if there's some sort of a morning tea or an afternoon tea put on. Yeah. So we basically kind of did a twofold thing. He had some sort of announcement to make. It's like, great, let's organise a morning tea. Everybody will come in for that. They'll enjoy that. He can make his announcement and I can run the workshop. So it was kind of a relaxed sort of environment, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Cool. Georgie.
Yeah, Lloyd, I just want to say thanks. And actually bouncing off what Tracy said, I've got a series of training sessions coming up with people who don't know each other, who come from different organizations, but who work in the same kind of space. And I can really see a sort of kind of stripped down version of this as like part of the introductions. What kind of things are you working on? Is there anything that you're stuck on? Because I notice in those rooms, whenever people can learn from each other, not just from me, they're there to learn from me ostensibly, but the more that we get that sideways, just so much richer it is. Does this, I feel like I'm getting the nod of affirmative from you.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Thank you so much. This is just fabulous.
Yep. No dramas. Yeah, 100%.
Awesome.
Cool. We have one from Ahmed. Ahmed, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, in your experience, did you see that a community of practice eventuated out of those conversations?
Not especially. In fact, there's potential for that, because if you highlight a lot of experts, sure, there's a great opportunity to put them together and kick off a community of practice for sure. This can most definitely lead into other things. The one we conducted in Department of Education actually was a part of a bigger project that we were running, an innovation project to try and understand. We did some human-centered design and a lot of interviewing across the organisation to understand some gaps, some issues. And this was the activity that we decided to run as the solution to that.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, we are at the 13th minute mark, so out of the 15th. So I don't think there's any more questions or hands up in the participants. So I think that's it. Angshu and Lloyd, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. This was very interesting. And maybe that also gives me some food for thought on how I can implement it within my organization. So thank you so much for your time today, Lloyd. And for our audience, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We will get back to those because last section, we do have a Q&A section planned out. So so keep on sharing your questions in the chat. So moving on now, let's welcome our next speaker, Stuart French. So Stuart has over 2 decades of experience helping organizations improve productivity and growth by enhancing workforce practices, business systems, and knowledge management. He has worked with both businesses and government entities spanning sectors like oil and gas, utilities, finance, and emergency services to manage knowledge and expertise, reduce risk, and drive continuous improvement. More recently, Stuart has focused on the potential of Gen AI, particularly in addressing long-standing challenges related to tacit expertise. He co-hosts the Melbourne KM Leaders Forum also known as KMLF, and has represented Australia in the KM Global Network for 9 years and regularly facilitates industry roundtables to deliver practical solutions where expert knowledge leads to success. Stuart, the stage is yours.
Great, thank you very much. I'll just share my screen, and hopefully you can all see that. There's a lot of talk right now, especially around tacit knowledge, with the impact that AI is going to have on it. So I thought I'd take this opportunity today just to talk about some of the impacts on tacit knowledge from AI and some of the important things about tacit knowledge we need to know when implementing AI. I work for Energy Safe Victoria, and right now we're working on our AI responsible use framework. And so we've been reviewing all of the the government guidances and standards and everything else that's out there right now in public practice to make sure that what we're doing is in the right direction. Every single one of these says that we need to be human-centric, right? So when we talk about AI, we're actually talking about more decision support than decision making. In fact, you can see down there the Artificial Intelligence Act of the European Union, and they have made it very, very clear that any part of AI delivery that impacts on decision making must be considered high risk. Section 53 has a small section of 4 exceptions to that. I've written a blog post on that if you're interested at deltaknowledge.net. But in general, anything that leads to decision making is kind of dangerous. And so if we look at that, we see that this idea of human centricity is resting on 2 really big assumptions. The first one is that we can reduce uncertainty by having access to more information. So if we give our key decision makers access to AI, access to knowledge from other people, from other projects, from other databases, then they will make big decisions. Now, Gary Klein, in his book Streetlights and Shadows, he points out that the naturalistic decision-making research just doesn't support that claim. Increasing the amount of information people have access to when they're making decisions does not correlate with better decisions or higher value outcomes. And that may seem shocking. I know it's against what you'd naturally think, and it goes against the whole idea of education in one way, but the science is pretty clear here that there is an optimal level of information that decision makers need. And the second one is that the human that's going to be using these AI tools and accessing other people's knowledge or information or data is going to hold enough tacit knowledge themselves to be able to validate what is and isn't correct. Now, this is really important because most of those guidelines talk about validation, talk about never accept what comes straight from an AI model, whether it's from human sources or whether it's from, training off the internet or other sources. And this kind of happens in 2 areas. Does the end user have the domain knowledge, the technical expertise to make sense of what the GPT is spitting out? But also, do they have the AI interaction skills? And the reason I bring this up is a lot of people are talking about AI like it's going to replace human beings, like we're going to move from human workers to AI workers. But really, there's a big problem there because AI doesn't understand context. That's what our local experts bring. And so my friend Helen Palmer wrote a fantastic article on this a few weeks ago. QR codes on the screen if you want to take a picture and read that article. She's a knowledge producer, has been for nearly 20 years. She's an expert change manager, and her discipline goes back over 100 years. They have always talked about the dual roles of creator and editor. And it's what she's seeing right now is a fundamental change to the nature of knowledge production, that being that there's now an extra role in there. So the creator role gets split in 2 to be a conceptualizer, which is our new job. That's the job of coming up with the ideas, asking the right questions. And that's quite different from just a creator. There's like this onus now to become a researcher of sorts. And when you are looking for answers, you're not just looking for a quick fix. You're willing to go on a learning journey to understand the nature of the area you're asking about. Then, of course, AI does the generation part, hopefully in a couple of seconds. Woohoo, big saving for us. But then we now take on a much more advanced editor role in that relationship. We're not just checking for spelling and grammar anymore. We're actually fact checking. We're almost being more like journalists or investigators on the end of that ChatGPT response. And I'm talking publicly, like using ChatGPT, but also using enterprise AI systems where you're accessing, RAG documents from your repository, from your Microsoft 365, or from other experts in your organization. So please have a look at that. It's really important. On the other end of things, we need to understand what information we're putting into our AI so we capture that tacit knowledge well. And this is where the good news starts, because traditionally, information type people have tried to capture these concepts and write them down, whether that's a doctrine or an engineering diagram. You know what I'm talking about, explicit knowledge. And a lot is lost in that sometimes. You just imagine we've got two concepts here that are well documented. And then the beauty of generative AI is it absorbs these well-known documents, but it creates what's called an inference field. And hopefully you can see that green in between them. And so unlike a search engine where you search and you'll find a document and then you read the document and hopefully that's the right one that had the answer you had, AI is able to synthesize multiple hundreds of documents and answer a question out here where there actually isn't anything written down. And so there's a little bit of a problem with that. They actually literally call this inference, and the LLMs, they're called inference engines. But the problem is it's reporting on information it doesn't actually have access to. So AI people from the information persuasion, they can call this hallucinations. But from a knowledge perspective, this is exactly what a human being does, right? Just as an example, if in an AI, if it gets asked a question out here, way outside what it knows, often that question, it will run home to base and give a question it knows about. Now, let me give an example of that. So if you ask an AI, how many B's in the word banana? It will answer 3. That is weird. Well, the reason it does that is because it has never been trained on anybody ever asking the question, how many B's in banana? It does have lots of people asking how many N's in banana. And so it goes, right, I've got a question about bananas. I know lots of how many's. And so it answers with the most common question. Does that make sense? And this is exactly how human experts work as well. They combine ideas and, based on how much experience they've got, they can get closer or more further away from the actual answer. And I can prove that because most of you just did that. There are actually only 2 N's in banana. There are 3 A's. But you didn't write the word out and count. And that's exactly what we do. So really AI, when it's in a knowledge mode, is working kind of like us. But there's even better news than that. The IT guys, the doctrine guys, the legal people, they solve this problem by trying to document everything, right? Write everything down, create all the rules. The problem is you always end up with a couple of little gaps. There's always something that comes up that doesn't have a rule assigned to it, and you end up in trouble. So instead, with artificial AI, we can use things called edge cases. And of course, each one of these edge cases is going to have its own little inference field where it can answer questions around it. But if we capture a whole bunch of these, then we don't just get a whole bunch of inference fields, we generate one massive inference field for the AI. I hope this is making sense. I'm trying to visualize a fairly complex topic here. But what it basically means is that when somebody now asks that question out here, it can actually, it won't answer with one of the big documents. It will now infer quite accurately what that answer might be. Now, is it a black and white, this is the rule? No, it's not an information system. It's a knowledge system. It's emulating tacit knowledge. And so it will bring up stuff just like that SME would that you just met through Lloyd's water cooler experience. When you call them, they're going to do a similar thing that the AI just did. And so the really nice news here is each of these edge cases can be recorded in thick description. So it can be in natural language, and the more natural it is, the better the AI can interpret it and can infer from it. And so giving it access to data is actually a lot less effective than giving it access to things. Let me give you one quick thing, but before I do, information equals good content. Knowledge equals broad context. So keep that in mind. One example of this is the expertise locator. Lloyd just talked about finding expertise. This is one of the most high value knowledge management tools ever created over the last couple of decades. The problem is we have these user profiles that are manually kept up to date. And so we have massive value from it, but the ROI is rotten. It's terrible because it takes so much work and so much effort to keep all these profiles updated. But instead, if we could use artificial intelligence to look at all the emails, look at all the project reports, look at documents and white papers that the people have written, presentations they've done, media agendas, and even meeting transcriptions from Microsoft Teams, then all of a sudden you've got a system that is inferring what people are experts at. It changes over time, and now we have good value and good ROI. This is where AI can really empower pre-existing knowledge management approaches. And with that, I'll hand it over to questions.
Wow, that's really insightful, and then really expand that whole AI piece. And yeah, in harnessing the hallucination side of AI, which is interesting. Got a couple of questions. One from Bob Farrico asking about the article that you mentioned early in the piece around AI and tacit knowledge, and there was a response around deltaknowledge.net. Is that where?
Yep. So I'll just pull it down. Hold on. Oh, I've lost it. Let's try again. My apologies. I have a little tricky way to get to this. And I'll bring up a QR and you can find me. There we go. If you scan that QR, it will bring up my my LinkedIn profile, and on there you can get to deltaknowledge.net. Cool.
Thanks for that. Couple of questions from Georgie. Georgie, are you?
Stuart, I mean, you just knocked my socks off. I think I'll ask the last question that I put in the chat. That idea that you had at the end of those like expanding inference fields through those edge cases, my mind immediately jumped to the kind of, like, to reference Cynefin framework, the complex or even the chaotic kind of problems, I know, right, that that public servants, senior public servants deal with absolutely constantly, where you are having to work out with imperfect information or with so much information you can't possibly wade through all of it, work out, okay, what do I do next? Where do I have no regrets pathways, etc.? This feels like the kind of thing that actually AI could get really good at, as long as you've got that ability to filter and interrogate and evaluate. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
No, you're absolutely spot on. The concept of expertise isn't just a person who can regurgitate the rules, right? They're a person who can be presented with a context between the rules and come up with a new solution, a new piece of knowledge. And so when those people walk out the door, often there's this earth-shattering silence as nothing happens. But then 3 months later, when something critical goes wrong, that's when you notice that knowledge is missing. and you can't respond to it. And AI, I think, is really showing promise as a way to finally cook that duck. You know, we've finally got a way for knowledge managers to bring the capture and succession planning of that expertise, not just the rules that it's based on.
Cool. I think we have 1 minute for last question. Armin?
Thank you, Dan. And Stuart, I really like the way you split out the creator versus editor roles into 3 different roles about conceptualizer, generator, and editor. When people are training large language models, people usually put in some data, like they don't have actual data, or they may have partial data that they feed in, and the LLMs are positioned to train on those data pieces. Now, to make sure that that initial data is of topmost quality, whose responsibility is it? Is it the conceptualizers or is it the editors?
No, I think once you're talking about the conceptualizer editor, you're talking about the users of the system. I think at the front end, when you're looking at setting up what data is going into your RAG systems, how are you? I mean, we don't train large language models, right? I mean, Meta spent $110 million in 4 months doing Llama 3. None of us can afford that sort of thing. But we can fine tune. So we might, for example, take a Llama 3 model and then fine tune it to be really, really good at picking up financial fraud, for example. So we'll feed it a bunch of extra things. And we need to understand when we fine tune a model like that, it gets much better at that one thing and much worse at everything else. That's just the nature of fine tuning. And so I think what we're doing is we're writing an AI framework that's actually split in 2 halves. So one half of it is very simple, very direct, looking at the users of AI. And then there's a much larger section which governs the implementation of AI systems or AI-based functionality within systems. And we're being quite deliberate because there's a whole different set of governance and a whole different set of skills that are required in those 2 areas.
Thank you so much.
All right, that's the end of the chat channel and the questions. I'll just drop in some info from Stuart and the knowledge movement into the chat. Over to you, Angshu.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you so much, Stuart. This was really interesting. I mean, AI is an area where I am deeply interested in, and I'm trying to upskill myself. So this is fascinating. And it is going to be very interesting to see how KM transforms in the future with the help of AI. So yeah, exciting times ahead. So let's move to our final speaker of the day, Jan Fry. So Jan has over 50 years of IT experience in public and private sectors. He has spent the last 12 years focusing on knowledge management with NOCO. Throughout his career, he has led KM assessments and lessons learned projects, including the 2019 Australian bushfires response. Jan has implemented lessons learned software across industries like fire services, nuclear power, and construction. He has won many awards for integrating knowledge management and information systems and chairs the Standards Australia Committee on KM, participating in HR and ISO committees. Jan is an active speaker and webinar presenter for Australian national bodies in KM, IT, quality, project management, training, and HR, and has delivered many KM webinars across industries, across universities in Australia. So Jan, over to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so my slide's very brief. Go to the next slide. Okay, so what I want to talk about is some things which you may not have thought about. I'm the Australian representative on the committee that's revising ISO 30401, the Knowledge Management Standard. And one of the issues that people have repeatedly given us is that the current standard does not define tacit and explicit knowledge. Now, the group we're with has done the hard yards, and we have done that. And you'll see that about this time next year when it's released. But we've done that in a framework of the standard being a knowledge management to-do list and a framework for action. So we have really concentrated on making usable definitions. A couple of weeks ago, Pavel Kaus from Switzerland mentioned that the definition of tacit knowledge is not as important as how you use it. In other words, whatever floats your boat is okay. It's how you use it, which is important. And I agree with that. But I'll go further. One of the things which we looked at when doing the standard was we went right back to basics, and everybody reread Nonaka, and everybody had a different view of what he said. And you see this coming out in that if you think about the Secchi model and the 4 quadrants and all that sort of stuff, what do you see first? Do you see categories of knowledge, or do you see movement? Because I see movement first. And my question is that spiral going inwards towards more detail or outwards towards more people, or both? And so much of what we talk about under this title of Capturing Tacit Knowledge is actually codifying. You know, writing a document with all the information in it, programming the robots. But when you look at knowledge management generally, you know, the IT department generally has control of your explicit knowledge. They are doing the what of it. But your job as a KM manager is how's it being used? How is it being moved? And to me, it's the same with tacit. You can do your expertise finders about who knows what, but my question is, how are you as a knowledge manager moving it? And that's where I came up to my beer and travel concept. And to some degree, this is overlapping with what Lloyd said. Let's back up. Let's take on board what Lloyd said. But the big message is, as a knowledge manager, you have to organize something like that. You have to have a budget to get people together and a budget in order to run it. And if you haven't got that, you know, that's the first things. When we go to a conference, I can tell you what your report on the conference is generally alike. It says there was one excellent paper, there were 2 that were good, but the valuable thing was the networking. And it's that face-to-face human interaction which is so important. And you know, Lloyd said it may only be a social gathering, but that's important. Now, you know, you're invited to put stuff on the chat line. I don't know how fast you can type, but we all talk at 100 words a minute, or if you're Stuart French, 130. And so it's this ability to talk to each other, which is such a valuable tool in transferring tacit knowledge. Conversations are an integral part of moving tacit knowledge. David Gertine has been on about this for years, and his stuff is a valuable, good starting point. But our challenges, to me, is that as we've moved post-COVID into all these online meetings and webinars and everything, we are not doing enough to follow up. There will be, all our speakers have said today, please contact me. But there will not be, in my experience, a lot of contact. We don't, when we run a webinar, automatically organise one-on-one, two-on-two follow-up conversations. When you're looking at this webinar, there's a real barrier, in my view, to a new person or a lurker to put what I'll call a simple question on the chat line. That's still a barrier. But if you talk to them, they might come out with it. So that I really endorse what Lloyd's organised, but I'm saying as a knowledge manager, it's up to you to structure it and to run it. Next thing I want to talk about is planned succession. Now, I got this from the ISO 30414 standard, which is human capital reporting. What happened was that the Securities and Exchange Commission in the US said that all listed companies shall report on human capital, full stop. The good people at ISO, and I can say here, led by Australians in this case, came up with a standard for human capital reporting, and above all, a valuable list of metrics, really good things that you should measure, can measure, and how to measure them, and what the measure might mean. Excellent stuff. One of the questions which sort of took my eye was a simple question. What percentage of your current positions was filled by planned succession? Next question, what percentage will be filled in the next 3 to 5 years? Now, I doubt if anybody attending this webinar would have a figure anywhere near 1% for that. So let's just remind you what planned succession is. Planned succession says this person is a candidate for one or more senior positions or alternative positions. And we are going about explicit, organised training and development of that person, including in situ experience, such as filling in for leave and things like that, to give them the exposure to the decision making and the tacit knowledge that goes with that position. Now, you've got a many-to-many relationship. You've got many candidates for one position, and a candidate will be a candidate for many positions. It doesn't mean they're going to get it. You still may advertise it. But my challenge is to walk up to HR and say, why do you always hire in? Why is it that what they know about what we do is better than what we know about what we do? And so what I'm saying is that the candidate may not necessarily be selected, but they'll be better equipped to be considered for the position. And you'll have to work with HR for this. Now, one of the issues I have is that the actual metrics should say critical positions, not just all positions, but we can deal with that. But this is also a very important aspect for SMEs. To my mind, what jumped out at me about this metric is, if it's a knowledge manager, you do not have planned succession in place for critical positions, then you're not really serious about transferring tacit knowledge. And one of the side issues which I think comes up for this is that in Australia we pay an enormous premium for CEOs. And maybe we do that because the rest of the management team is not up to scratch. So maybe we start with planned succession at the top level. But it's important to me anyway that planned succession is part of your knowledge management strategy, and that you actually work with HR on this. The other thing is mentoring. Now, for me, mentoring is an essential part of a community of practice. You can't just rely on the online interactions. You actually have to team people up in a COP with a mentor. Carl Eric Zwiebe said that once you stop formal education, you automatically assume a responsibility to teach. And so what I would say is, what is your responsibility to teach? Fisher Yu the other day in a talk about tacit knowledge and mentoring highlighted the fact that you might have all of the guidance documents for a person to read and learn about what they should do and why they should do it. But without mentoring, you're only teaching. You're only teaching. So as a KM manager, you need to take on learning and development, get mentoring in there as well, and value add to what they think they're doing. So that's your challenge. The final point that I want to talk about is knowledge management policy. Now, this is a mandatory part of the KM standard. Thou shalt have a KM policy. I've seen very few of them. But I have seen some attempts to document the responsibility to share. Now, in organisations, humans might have a tendency not to share everything they know. Project managers and lawyers are the worst because they're setting themselves up for the next big plum job, and they want to make sure that they're the ones who've got all the knowledge to do that. And you can say part of my KM strategy is we have a sharing culture. And you have this wonderful statement about, we are a sharing organisation, we have a sharing culture, and you can put up on the wall beside your mission statement for the company and just simply walk past it every day. So what does a sharing policy actually mean? What does the responsibility to share mean? And the crux of this is that a policy should have sanctions. If you have a conscious and shown example of someone refusing to share, is it a dismissible offence? And unless you address that issue, I don't think you're really serious about a responsibility to share and move tacit knowledge. And if you want an exercise, throw that dismissible offence question at the C-suite, and you'll really find out how important knowledge management is to them. So in summary, sharing tacit knowledge, same as explicit, it's all about the movement. You need the structures and execution of transferring tacit knowledge. You need the conversations. You need to organise them. You need planned succession. You need corporate adoption of the movement of tacit knowledge. And you need mentoring and wide support for the movement of tacit knowledge. And above all, you need a KM policy to make it real. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ian. I'm mindful of the time, so I'll just, there's only a couple of questions coming through, but one of them is around from Nicole. I'm not sure if Nicole's still here because she needed to shoot off, but around non-office workers. So workers are out on field, and how does that work with the knowledge, transfer, especially?
Yeah, well, obviously, if they're out in the field, they're in a team, so you're obviously setting up something within the team to share. But bringing those teams together, let's say you're Origin Energy and you've got gas fields all over Queensland, then the more those people can be brought together, the better. And you may have to do that online. You may. It's best if you don't. It's best if you do get them together and organise something. Lloyd talked about the excuse of a major announcement from the CEO or whoever, and bring them all in together. Because when you put people together, they will talk. They might talk about work and it'll be good, but it's important that you organise it. So out in the field is a problem. But I did an exercise with a mining company, and we organised basically the stand-up toolbox meeting to be shared across the organisation.
Oh, cool. No, thanks for that. I'll stop the questions there. There are a couple more, and we'll take them offline with you, Ian.
Well, we're going to have a follow-up one-on-one conversation, aren't we?
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jan and Dan. And this was indeed a very thought-provoking session, Jan. And as you can see in the chat, we love to see the comments of our participants. So this is what we want. We want these conversations to flow, and it will be really good if we can have more of such forums so that we can all connect and learn collectively. So having said that, I don't think we'll have time for another Q&A session because it's already 12:54 our time, that's the Sydney time. But Tracy, if we can go to the Melbourne KMLF slide, please. I would like to take a moment to introduce the Melbourne KMLF slide. So Tracy, can we have that on, please?
Just let me know when it comes up.
Yeah, sure. Sure. Thank you so much, Tracy. So KMLF, as we heard it from Stuart as in Stuart's intro as well. So for those who may not be familiar with it, so this is a forum that we have in Melbourne, but then we also have an online session. I mean, not the whole one, but at least a part of it where we can be we can join. So in Australia, we don't have many forums dedicated to KM. So this is definitely one to follow. And there there is an upcoming event on October 23rd, which is a discussion on a thought-provoking book. And Stuart is one of the co-hosts as well. So yeah, the links are already shared by Dan, I believe. So do make it a point to join this forum, right? And we also have a short survey. So it will be really helpful if you can fill up the survey and if Dan can pop up the link in the chat. So we'd love to see your feedback so that we can continue working on improving the quality of these sessions. Having said that, the next webinar, so tomorrow we have another webinar, which is on Gen AI in KM. And we are wrapping up with an in-person meetup. So we'd love to see you there. So do join us. We have sessions in Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne. So the details are available in the registration link. So do join us if you can. So as we wrap up, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Lloyd, Stuart, and Hian for sharing your valuable insights with us today. And of course, a big thank you to all the participants for being so actively engaged. And let us keep the dialogue going. And we have also shared the links to our speakers' profiles in the chat. So please feel free to connect with them. But once again, thank you so much for being a part of Global KM Week. And enjoy the rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are joining us from. And yeah, thank you so much. Goodbye for now.
Thanks, Ange, and thanks to everyone who came from overseas and staying up so late or so early. We appreciate it.